Hello everybody, Decaff back again with a continuation of our project building our Lufthansa 737. So you'll notice today I have a new color on the belly and the engines and a little bit different color on the tail. What I did was I went and found a few different models and other pictures from online, and I was able to get a fairly close color match between about 3 different pictures. That meaning that I went and found that this blue was pretty close to the blue found in 3 pictures, and this gray was the same. So that I feel pretty confident this is pretty close to what the real color looks like. You have to be careful in what pictures you choose, because some of them are going to have shadows and things like that, so you want to be careful about your sources in your resource database there. So let's start off by starting on our decals now. Let's go and look at our model here. And our decals, if you remember, are basically anything that we're not going to be embedding in the base mesh. So in this case, the airline name, this little bit down there, the registration and flag, and the tail art, and possibly this right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this text right here, because this is going to let us show a bunch of different options within the text. So to insert text, we can import a text, or not import, insert a text object. So by pressing our space key and then going down to text, we insert a text object at wherever our cursor is currently at. Now this text object only has 2 modes: object to place it, and then edit mode to edit what it actually says. So let's go in and type Boeing 737-600, and on our second line, what does that say? It's an LO 2 R's ACH. LORRACH. Now looking at it from our top view, this is what it looks like. Now this doesn't really look like what we had here. Right here, this is going to be right justified. So we're going to have to play around with this a little bit. What we can do is go down into our edit mode options here, and we can either center it or make it right justified like that. Now because on the other side of the airplane I'm going to need a model just another text just like this, what I'm going to do is duplicate this font. Now what that means is I'm going to go Shift D to duplicate it, and there is my second font there. Duplicating things is a very easy thing to do in Blender. It's very powerful because you don't have to recreate anything, and if you are very smart and with how you rotate things, you can do a lot of really neat things. So let's go back and edit our original one, and we can tell that this is our original one because the name here just says font. If we look down in the bottom left corner of our main graphic screen, that says font, and our duplicate here is font 0.001. If we made a duplicate of this, now this duplicate is 0.002, but we don't need that duplicate. So let's go back in and make this right justified. And what we want to do is have both of these models have similar centers. So in this case, we're going to leave the center where it is at the default mode, because these are both going to be very forward. So let's get these rotated into position. So rotate around the x-axis 90 degrees. And let's move it over to here. We're going to rotate this 90 degrees as well, but we're also going to flip it around the z-axis 180 degrees. So now both of our texts are in about the right spot. But now what we need to do is start scaling this down, and we need to figure out exactly where this needs to go. So let's go into our first viewpoint here, number 1 viewpoint, and move this into position right about there and start scaling that down. And to figure out how much we have to scale down by, we need to go and look at our model. And what I like to do is look at the windows to figure out how long this text needs to be. So this is 1, 2, 3, and spacing wide, and it's pretty much flush with the leading edge of the first window. So let's go in and make the scale worth that, right about there. We got to make sure this is flush though on the front, so we need to scale it down a little bit more. So let's open up our end window to see how much this is scaled by. So this is about 25% of our original size. And we're going to want to pay attention to that because we want to do the exact same thing to this as well. So we're going to scale it 0.225. Nope, it was 0.255, my bad. Scale 0.255. So now they're both the exact same size. Now what we need to do, in order to get them painted, I like to paint them before I get them into position, because it's easier to select them when they're away from the fuselage, is we need to convert their object type. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert them from a text object into a mesh object. We're going to turn them into the same type of object as the rest of our model, with vertices and faces and things like that. So we're going to go Object, Convert Object Type, or you can just press Alt-C, and we're going to convert them to mesh. Now you can do them both at the same time, but I chose it to do individually here. There we go. Now notice now that I can't see the other text from this side. I have to rotate all the way around to see this. This is because of something called normals, which we'll be talking about later on. And they're very, very important. But for now, all we need to know is that they are only visible from one side, and that's fine. It happens to be the side that we're reading from anyway, so we're fine there. So now let's go ahead and paint this. Let's go into the vertex paint mode. We're going to select everything, and I already have the blue paint selected for the tail color. There we go. Now sometimes you might run into a little bit of trouble getting these painted right away. I've found that sometimes when I convert the object into mesh, it can get a little funky and it won't paint right away. So what I do is I convert it into my mesh, and then I go into the texture paint mode, go back to object mode, and then go right into vertex mode, and that seemed to take care of the problem. So now let's get these positioned. What we want to do first, since we know that they're in the right position this way, just about in the right position, let's scooch this down a bit, probably to about there. What we need to do now is get them aligned this way, closer to the center line of the model. So we're going to bring them on in. And right now, we can't tell exactly where the fuselage is in this mass of white and gray. So what we're going to do is go into the solid mode, and this lets us now see the edge of our fuselage. It's a very, very handy little tool. So we're going to rotate this. We're just going to hit R to rotate, and we're going to bring it on in. Bring in a little more rotating, just enough to update. When we get a little closer, we can see better. So it looks pretty good there. Now, one thing that we notice here is that this is now out a little ways. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this in. Oops, there we go. Bring it in a little bit. And you'll notice the text is starting to disappear into the model. That's okay. What we're going to do now is rotate around the Z-axis and rotate it so it's just peeking through. Right about there. Let's see how that looks now. It's still a little bit far out, so let's go and try to bring this back in. Now, one thing that you can do to make your rotations a little bit more accurate is bring your mouse farther away from the point you're rotating around. Out here, a smaller movement of my mouse will not result in a big change. So let's go with that. That looks pretty good right there. Now what we want to do is make our other object here in the exact same fashion. We want it rotated and positioned the exact same way. This is where our end window comes in real handy, because we can copy paste these coordinates, copy there, hit return to get out of there, and then go over here and paste that coordinate in. And because we want it on the other side of the model, we'll get rid of the negative sign, and that'll bring it in there. Now we got to rotate this. So this is rotated 102.849. Well, let's go back a little bit. Copy that. Hit return to exit out of the editing that mode. There we go. We'll type that in there. See how that looks. Well, that disappeared in there. Well, where did that go? There we are. So now let's get the Z rotation done. So we're going to copy that value there, return to exit out, and now we got to pay attention a little bit to how this is rotating. What we're going to do is 180 minus that value. And we can type basic math into these things, and now we have our object moved out a little bit. So now let's start moving this guy in until he starts to disappear. There we go, right about there. Now what I'm going to do is bring these two objects and merge them together. What this allows me to do then is move them forward, backwards, up and down, and they'll move identically. What it does is it takes two separate meshes of the two separate objects of the same object type. In this case, they're both meshes, so it works. And I'll merge them together so that it'll be one mesh. So I have this one selected over here. Now let's select this one right there. Now you notice that my selection went right to the middle of the aircraft, showing me that now these are both selected pretty darn close to the center. Now, one last thing that we got to worry about here is that this isn't quite positioned right. I thought I had gotten that right. So let's move this forward. So it's just about in line there. And we can go into wireframe to double check its positioning. We're off by a bunch there. So let's just move it right down in there. Go back into the solid view. Look at it from the side. Oh yeah, we can bring this in a little bit. Right about there. So now let's go back and select both of these guys. Oh, I accidentally selected the fuselage. Oh no. Well, if I continued on and selected that as well, now I have three objects here, all that I'd be merging together. Well, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo my two selections. And if I accidentally select the fuselage again, I can undo that selection with Control Z. It's very, very handy. There we go. Now I have both of those selected. I'm going to hit Control J. Control J merges both of these. So that now if I go into edit mode, notice that I have both of these guys selected. I can select things there, I can select things there. So now they are one object. They're one mesh object. Now there's one last thing that I got to do to these guys, and that is merge their centers to the right point. Now if I start doing things, this could start moving around because it's not properly referenced. So what I'm going to do is move its center right to the origin, the very, very center of the model. And to do that, I'm going to select the fuselage, and I'm going to move my cursor to that point. So I'm going to go Shift S, and then I'm going to select Cursor Select. Snap the cursor to the selection. And there, my cursor now is snapped right to the origin. And then I'm going to select my decal here, and I have the cursor over there, so I'm going to hit Center Cursor. And what that does is it moves the center of this object to wherever my cursor is. So now my center is right there, and it's always going to be about this center point of the model, meaning that this is not going to move at any point in time. It's very, very handy to be there. So this was our first little introduction to working with decals and fonts and text and things. I hope this is very useful to you. We're going to go over more about this later on. Next time we're going to be working on the tail art, which is going to introduce some new things, all decal related. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comment section down below. I'll be happy to answer them. And as always, have a good time modding.